Margaret sat alone in her sunlit kitchen, a cup of tea warming her hands, though the warmth didn't seem to reach her heart. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight spilled across the garden, catching the golden leaves of the maple tree in the front yard. It should have been beautiful, and yet a quiet ache lingered inside her, the kind that comes from years of small, unspoken moments. She often imagined what life would have been like if things had been different. If she had taken that trip to Paris when she was younger. If she had danced at that charity ball instead of watching from the corner. Her mind wandered to these unshared dreams, little sparks of longing tucked behind the routines of her quiet days. Margaret smiled faintly, trying to push the wistfulness away. She didn't want to dwell too much on what could have been. The ticking of the old clock on the wall was the only sound for a while, steady and predictable. It reminded her of the comfort of routine, yet also the weight of passing time. Her life had been full of love, yes, but also small regrets and moments she hadn't dared to speak aloud. She had always been careful, always polite, always hiding the trembling hopes of her heart. A soft breeze drifted in through the half-open window, carrying the scent of roses from the garden. Margaret leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. She allowed herself a tiny daydream. Someone noticing her not just for the cookies she baked or the stories she told, but for who she truly was. Someone who might see the quiet yearning in her smile and understand it. Was the kind of thought she usually chased away, but today it lingered. Maybe it was the light, soft and golden, that made everything seem possible. Maybe it was simply the memory of someone she hadn't seen in months. Someone who had always brought unexpected joy into her life. Her grandson, Ethan. Ethan had a way of entering a room and changing its rhythm, without even trying. He had a bright smile, curious eyes, and a gentle laugh that could make the dullest afternoon feel lively. Margaret often thought about how quickly he had grown. He had once been a little boy, building castles in the backyard, holding her hand as they wandered through the autumn leaves. Now he was a young man with ideas, dreams, and a quiet intensity she hadn't fully expected. The sound of a key turning in the lock snapped her back from her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but anticipation. She wasn't expecting anyone today. She set her tea down and wiped her hands on her apron. The door creaked open, and there he was. Ethan, standing in the doorway, a small bundle of nervous energy in his posture. His eyes searched hers for some clue of welcome, and Margaret's lips curved into a soft, knowing smile. "Grandma," he said, almost breathlessly, as if he'd been holding back for a long time. "Can we talk?" Her hands trembled slightly, not from worry, but from the sudden surge of curiosity and anticipation. She had no idea what words were about to come next, and that uncertainty sent a ripple through her chest. She motioned for him to sit, her heart quietly urging her to prepare for something she didn't yet understand. As Ethan settled into the chair opposite her, Margaret observed the subtle changes in him, the way his fingers fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve, the small sigh that escaped him like a secret. He seemed almost fragile, carrying something inside that he hadn't yet dared to share. Margaret leaned forward slightly, offering him the comfort of her presence without words. She had always been good at reading unspoken emotions, and right now, she could sense that he needed her more than ever. "Grandma, there's something important I want to tell you," he began, his voice soft but earnest. The words hung in the air between them, delicate and full of weight. Margaret felt her heart stir, a mix of hope and gentle apprehension. Whatever was coming, it mattered deeply to him and therefore deeply to her. The room seemed to shrink around them, filled with the quiet tension of unspoken feelings. Margaret took a deep breath and offered a reassuring smile. She didn't know what Ethan's next words would be, but she was ready to listen, ready to share in whatever moment of life had brought him here. Outside, the golden sunlight continued to filter through the window, spilling warmth across the wooden floorboards. Inside, a grandmother and her grandson sat, suspended in the fragile, tender space just before a revelation, a space filled with love, memory, and the quiet magic of connection. Margaret didn't yet know what would follow, but in that moment, every heartbeat held the promise of something extraordinary. As the sunlight shifted across the kitchen, Margaret's mind drifted back to another time, a quieter, simpler time when her own heart had first learned to hope. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over her. Soft and golden like the afternoon light. It had been many years ago, during her early 20s in a small town not far from here. Margaret remembered walking through the local library one rainy afternoon, the faint scent of old books mingling with the damp air. She had been searching for a novel she loved, fingers tracing the spines as she moved from shelf to shelf. And then, almost like a sudden spark in her memory now, she had noticed him. His name was Daniel. He was there every week, quietly reading at the same wooden table by the window. Margaret didn't know him at first, only that there was a warmth in his eyes that drew her attention. They never spoke for weeks, merely exchanging polite smiles from across the room. But those small, unspoken gestures felt meaningful in a way she hadn't experienced before. Every time he looked up and caught her gaze, Margaret's heart would flutter, a gentle reminder that some connections are felt long before they are spoken aloud. Their first conversation had been accidental, yet perfect in its simplicity. Margaret had reached for the same book he had just picked up. Their hands brushed, and he had looked at her with an apologetic smile. "Sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to take it from you." "It's okay," she replied, her voice quieter than she expected. And just like that, they had started talking about books, about small things in town, about dreams too shy to voice elsewhere. It was never rushed or dramatic, just gentle conversations that left a lingering warmth in her chest. Long after she had walked home, they would meet like this for weeks, sharing silent moments of laughter, passing each other notes about a good poem or a new author, and exchanging glances that spoke of unspoken admiration. Margaret had felt alive in a way she hadn't before, carried by a quiet hope that perhaps in the vast world, someone might see her, not just her routines, but the real her. But life, as it often does, had a way of shifting plans. Daniel had been offered a position in another city, and Margaret had been preparing to move to college in a distant town. The timing had never been right. Their last meeting had been at the train station, a brief hug, a shared promise to write. And yet, somehow, the letters never came as faithfully as they had hoped. Life moved on, and their paths had diverged, leaving only memories and the faint ache of nostalgia. Margaret opened her eyes, back in her kitchen, and felt the echoes of that young love swirl softly inside her. The memory was bittersweet not because it ended in heartbreak, but because it reminded her that love had always been patient, quiet, and tender in its own way. That first spark, those fleeting weeks of shared laughter and understanding, had shaped the way she approached her heart ever since. It had taught her to notice subtle kindness, to cherish gentle smiles, and to recognize the beauty of moments that might never last forever. Even now, decades later, Margaret carried those lessons with her. She had poured that same tenderness into raising her family, into nurturing Ethan's own dreams, and into savoring the quiet joys of life. It was why she understood him so well, why she could feel the weight of his words before they were even spoken, why her heart trembled slightly when he looked at her with something he had kept hidden. The soft sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside reminded her that time passes quietly, shaping everything in its path. Some people are only with us for a season, leaving footprints on our hearts that last a lifetime. Margaret had learned to hold those memories close, not with sadness, but with gratitude for the beauty they had given her. Her gaze fell on Ethan, sitting across the room, nervous and unsure. She saw in him the same hope she once had, the same quiet courage to follow a feeling that might change everything. And she understood, better than anyone, that what he was about to say mattered, not just in the moment, but in shaping the person he would become. Margaret leaned back slightly, letting the memory settle in her heart. She didn't need to speak about Daniel or the lost afternoons of her youth. The echoes were enough. They reminded her that life was made up of small, meaningful moments, and that love, gentle, patient, and unspoken, could carry us through even the longest years. And in that quiet, golden light of the afternoon, Margaret felt ready. Ready to listen to Ethan. Ready to share in whatever revelation he had kept inside. Ready, once more, to witness the tender unfolding of a heart reaching towards something beautiful. The soft chime of the front doorbell echoed through Margaret's quiet home, pulling her from her thoughts. She had been tidying the living room, her mind wandering between the past she had just remembered and the present moment that awaited. With a small sigh, she set down the dustcloth and moved to open the door. There, standing on the doorstep with a hesitant smile, was Ethan. His presence carried the same gentle warmth it always had, but now there was a subtle difference, a quiet confidence, as if life had shaped him into someone both familiar and new. "Grandma," he said softly, his voice carrying that mix of excitement and nervousness she knew so well. Margaret's hands trembled slightly, though she quickly smoothed them against her apron. "I came by. I wanted to see you." Margaret stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. The room felt both unchanged and subtly different, the same cozy furniture, the same faint scent of her lavender sachets, yet charged with the quiet anticipation of what was to come. They settled into the living room, the soft sunlight streaming through the curtains, painting golden patterns across the carpet. Margaret's eyes lingered on Ethan, noticing the little details. The way he pushed the stray lock of hair from his forehead, the slight tension in his shoulders, and the thoughtful way his eyes occasionally drifted toward hers, seeking connection without words. "I wasn't sure if I should just call first," Ethan began, breaking the silence. "I didn't want to surprise you too much." His eyes met hers, and for a moment words weren't necessary. Margaret simply smiled, letting him know that this moment, this shared space, was exactly where he was meant to be. They talked quietly at first, about small things. The garden, the weather, how Mrs. Thompson down the street had baked her famous apple pie. But beneath the ordinary conversation, a deeper current flowed. Margaret could feel it, the same spark of connection she had sensed years ago, now matured into a quiet, mutual understanding. Ethan shifted slightly, glancing at the window where sunlight filtered through the autumn leaves. "Grandma, I've been thinking a lot about the past lately," he said. Margaret's heart stirred. She had always known he was reflective, but hearing it voiced aloud added a new layer of intimacy. "You mean old memories?" she asked gently. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, and also how much those moments shape who we are. I guess I never realized how much the little things you said to me, the little advice you gave, stayed with me." Margaret felt a warmth rise in her chest. The quiet pride of seeing someone grow, the gentle acknowledgement of a bond formed over years of shared time and love. It was a feeling she had always cherished, but now it came tinged with nostalgia and a gentle longing for moments past. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply sat together, watching the sunlight dance across the room, letting the comfort of each other's presence fill the space. Margaret noticed how familiar yet different he seemed. The quiet balance of boyhood innocence and young adulthood now blended in one thoughtful gaze. Then, Ethan spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma, I wanted you to know something important. Something that's been on my mind for a while." His hands rested on his knees, fingers fidgeting slightly, betraying the nervousness he tried to hide. Margaret's hands trembled again, not from worry, but from the anticipation of hearing what mattered so deeply to him. She reached out and lightly placed her hand over his, a gesture of quiet reassurance. "You can tell me anything, Ethan. You know that." He nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm thinking about making some changes. In my life. Things that matter to me. Things I've been afraid to try before. And I wanted you to hear it from me first because you've always been the one who believes in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Margaret's heart swelled. There was a tenderness in his words, a vulnerability that reminded her of the little boy she had watched grow into this thoughtful young man. She squeezed his hand gently, letting him know that his honesty, his courage, and his heart were enough. "You've grown so much, Ethan," she said softly. "And whatever path you choose, I'll be proud of you. You've always had the courage to follow your heart, even when it wasn't easy." They shared a long, quiet moment, filled with unspoken understanding. No dramatic confessions were needed, no grand gestures required. It was the simple, quiet presence of one another, the shared history and love that made the room feel warmer than any sunlight could. Outside, the autumn leaves rustled gently in the breeze. And inside, Margaret realized that some moments, some connections carry a lifetime of meaning. The past had shaped them, yes, but the present allowed them to recognize the depth of their bond. Quiet and enduring, tender and human, and in that serene, golden light, Margaret and Ethan sat together, hearts aligned in the soft understanding that family, love, and quiet trust can speak louder than any words ever could. The afternoon sun had softened into a warm, golden glow, spilling across the living room where Margaret and Ethan sat. The quiet hum of the day felt like a gentle lull, giving space for truths that had waited patiently to be spoken. Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, taking a deep breath. Margaret noticed the familiar nervous energy in his posture, but there was also a calm determination, a readiness to finally share what had been on his mind. She reached out, placing her hand lightly over his, as if to silently say, "I'm here. You can tell me anything." "Grandma," he began, his voice low but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what I want, and about who I want to be. And part of that is being honest with myself and with you." Margaret's hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had always known that Ethan carried a thoughtful heart, full of careful reflections and quiet courage. She nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I'm planning to move closer to Lily's family next year," he said, the words finally escaping. "It's important to me, to try something new, to step outside my comfort zone, and to follow the feelings I've been afraid to fully admit." Margaret felt a rush of warmth in her chest. She remembered the nervous boy who had once clung to her hand during thunderstorms, the little boy who had built castles in the garden. And now, sitting before her, was a young man ready to embrace life fully, carrying the same honesty and courage she had once admired in Daniel. In her own youth, "You're doing the right thing, Ethan," she said softly, squeezing his hand gently. "Following your heart is never easy, but it's always worth it. I'm proud of you, more than you can imagine." Ethan's eyes glistened, and he smiled, a smile that seemed to carry the weight of years of uncertainty and hope all at once. "I was nervous about telling you," he admitted, "because I didn't want to disappoint you." I didn't want you to think I was leaving you behind. Margaret shook her head, her voice gentle but firm. You could never disappoint me. You are my grandson, and seeing you grow into the person you're meant to be, that's all I've ever wanted. Love, courage, kindness. That's what I hope for you. And hearing you speak your truth just now, it makes me so proud. For a moment, they sat together in silence, letting the emotions settle like soft sunlight across the room. Margaret thought of the past, the memories of her own young love, the lessons life had quietly taught her, the small moments of connection that had shaped her heart. And she realized that these lessons weren't just for her. They were living within Ethan now, in the way he chose honesty, respect, and thoughtfulness. Grandma, Ethan whispered, I hope you'll always be a part of my life, no matter where I go. Margaret's eyes glistened, tears threatening but never spilling fully, held back by a smile that radiated love and understanding. Always, Ethan. You don't have to worry about that. You will always have a home here, in my heart. No matter the distance. He reached out and hugged her gently. A simple, heartfelt gesture that carried the weight of unspoken words. Past memories and future hopes. In that embrace, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that life would continue to move, that seasons change and people grow, but the bonds forged through love, trust, and shared understanding were unbreakable. When they finally separated, Ethan looked at her with a quiet smile, the kind that spoke of gratitude, respect, and deep affection. Thank you, Grandma, he said, for always listening, for always believing in me. Margaret's lips curved into a gentle, knowing smile. Thank you for trusting me, Ethan. That's one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. As the sunlight slowly faded into the soft hues of evening, Margaret reflected on the journey of the heart. Life is a tapestry of moments, some fleeting, some enduring, but every act of courage, every honest word, every shared feeling leaves a mark. She realized that growth isn't measured by distance or achievements alone, but by the capacity to love deeply, respect openly, and connect meaningfully. Ethan lingered for a while, talking about plans, dreams, and small hopes for the coming months. Margaret listened, her heart full of quiet joy. She understood that life continues to move, but its beauty lies in moments like this, tender, genuine, an unforgettable. As he finally rose to leave, Margaret walked him to the door. They stood for a moment in the soft glow of evening, the kind of silence that carries understanding instead of words. Remember, she said, her voice gentle, love well, live fully, and never be afraid to speak your truth. Ethan nodded, eyes bright, and with a heartfelt smile, he stepped out into the cool evening. Margaret watched him go, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and hope, knowing that the future was full of possibilities and that her heart, like his, was strong enough to embrace them all. Inside, the house was quiet again, but Margaret didn't feel alone. She felt connected, grateful, and deeply aware of the power of honesty, trust, and love. And in that quiet peace, she understood something timeless. Life is not measured by the years we live, but by the hearts we touch, the truths we share, and the courage we carry in each tender moment.